Iuliana, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to see you. I'm happy to be here.
So am I really excited to have this conversation with you. You're an entrepreneur, you're a wife, you're a mother of two beautiful girls, and most recently founder of Mara Learning. And so, for the purposes of today's episode, we wanted to touch on all the different aspects of you because they're all connected. But why don't we start with your entrepreneurial journey and how you got to this point?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for putting together this podcast. I think it's amazing to give an audience and a voice to women who have reinvented themselves, and I'm sure there'll be men in the future as well. Just to talk about the fact that no path to success is linear, really.
Mhm.
And it's all about reinventing yourself and learning from what it didn't work and finding purpose and meaning and just moving forward. I grew up in Romania, as you know, Eastern Europe. I grew up in communism. Romania actually had the most brutal dictatorship in the Soviet bloc. When I was growing up and I was a child, food was rationed. We didn't have food. We didn't have heat in the home. We would go to school and actually we would be in the classroom trying to write, and we had mittens and gloves on our hands. Or they would have electricity cuts at night, and we would have to do the homework on at candle. It wasn't because we didn't have the infrastructure. It was because we had a dictator. His name was Ceausescu, and he decided at one point in time that he wanted to pay the national debt at the expense of the people. So the people in power lived lavishly, and we are really poor. And I think the biggest problem growing up in Romania for me, it was that the society was closed. You couldn't travel. You didn't know what was going on in the world. But as a kid, it didn't, my parents were the one who were dealing with that. I was happy to be with my friends, with my parents, for my grandma to make cookies. They were homemade. For me to learn and study, that was probably my refuge. And communist system fell down when I was in grade 9, so I was 15 years old. And I remember very well, I was at a camp with my school on top of the mountain, and suddenly we hear this loud song that was actually banned because it was an old song, old national anthem, really playing from speakers in the middle of the mountain. And I kind of wondered, like, what's going on? And I knew in that moment that something meaningful is happening and the system is toppled down, and that kind of whole change came. And then for all my high school and university in Romania, because I studied journalism there, it was all about Romania being open to the West and kind of integration with the Western world, with democracy, with knowledge and information. I didn't really know any English until I was 18 years old, because before
Wow.
I said, I don't need to learn English. Why would I need? I can go anywhere. What am I going to do? And then suddenly, like, oh, I need to learn English. I actually have to talk to people who are not Romanian speakers. Um, and I also had a desire to kind of to see the world, and that actually what pushed me to study. And at the end of my mm, journalism degree, I actually applied to get I applied for a scholarship because I couldn't afford to pay for a study in the States, and I got a scholarship at a master's program in the United States, and that's kind of what brought me to United States. And
So can I pause for a second because that's I love the story that you're sharing, and as you know, I have a similar one of an immigrant. I came to this country at 15. You were 18, I guess, when you went to US. Was it 18, 19?
I was 24, 23, 24.
24. Oh my gosh, even older. So and I think that makes a difference, right? When you're immigrating to a country when you're 2 or 4 or 6, you don't know anything. You don't know any better. So whether you're here, there, or wherever, it doesn't matter, right? But at our age, now we come with, some history, some baggage. And how did that play into everything? Because that must have been a lot more difficult.
It it was difficult, and I'd say it really taught me resilience. And back home, my parents loved me, my grandparents loved me. You know how it is, a very family-oriented culture, so you do have the support of your family, generally speaking. And suddenly, I remember I was like 23 at the end of 2024, and I moved to the United States. I went to Ithaca College, and Cornell University was the university I studied. And I was in Ithaca, a small town, and I was trying to find an apartment. And someone said, "Oh, go outside and you're going to find the newspaper boxes. And they're just a block away." You know, English for me was the first language. And
Yes.
a block in Romanian comes from German, means a building. So I
Yeah.
go at the end of the street and I'm like, where is the building? I don't see any buildings. It's a block away, but I don't know where the
Yeah.
buildings are. They're just
Yeah.
houses. And then
Yeah.
just little things, learning. Actually, I would say it gave me a lot of humility and it
Yeah.
made me understand what it means um, to not think like the majority. It
Yeah.
made me feel, it made me
Yeah.
empathize more with people who are not the majority or don't have the power.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the piece of, you actually immigrated by yourself, right? Like it's not that you went with your family or anyone or a friend. Did you? Was it by yourself? You just went by yourself.
I was entirely by myself in the middle of the upstate New York, which is actually 5.5 hours away from New York City. And the funny thing is, I did have a friend who was studying there, a friend who came from Romania, and he picked me up at the airport at JFK, New York City. And I remember we were driving, it was night, and I see the city behind me, and I'm like, where are we going? And he said, do you know where Ithaca, New York is? I'm like, New York City? Like, no, 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 it's not New York City. It's 5.5 hours away
My
from New York
God.
City in the middle of the country side.
And so how is this small town in terms of being open to immigrants and people that don't speak, the language, that don't think like them, that don't act like them, because that's such a transition as well.
I actually found that my experience in the United States, and especially because Ithaca was a small town, it was a college town. So there are two universities. There's Cornell University, very known, and then Ithaca College or Liberal Arts College, also known but a bit smaller. They're actually quite open. And I'd say from my experience, Americans were always very warm and very welcoming, especially if you connected to them at a human to human level.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice.
didn't have a car. I had to take the bus. No one would take the bus. It was quite, I couldn't afford to buy a car and I didn't have a driving license because in Romania, in a big city, you don't need a car.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a disadvantage. And I think I remember when it was the first break, fall break for 4 days, I said to my friend that I ended up becoming really good friends with a girl and a boy. I'm like, I like to go to New York City. I have to see New York City. So I went to New York City because New York City is such an iconic city. And I was a little disappointed. I didn't really get New York City. I'm like, it's almost like too big. I don't understand. But then I realized you have to go back to actually really discover New York City.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so you end up in US, you're studying that there for a couple years. Is it a year or two? And then how do you end up in Canada?
I studied in the US and the program was 2 years, but I tried to graduate as soon as possible. So I ended up doing it in a year and a half because I didn't have a lot of money. And I wanted to be able to get a job. And then what happens in the States, you have a work permit that lasts for a year or 2 years, depending on what it is now, um, as long as you get a job before you graduate.
Yeah.
And usually after you graduate, you have 10 days. And after that, if you don't get a job, then you have to leave the country.
Oh
And
my
and
God.
I remember I was in the States and the .com and the internet was just happening. It was really in the beginning of 2000. And I read an article. I'm like, I want to be part of the internet. I don't know what it is, but sounds fascinating. But because
Yeah.
I was in New York, most of the jobs were actually in New York City or on the East Coast. So I ended up flying on my Thanksgiving break for 4 days to San Francisco with my resume in my hand. I had applied to a lot of jobs, but no one really answered me. And I knew someone working at a .com company, like a big consulting company, and I knew the name of the hiring manager. And I literally had 3 days in the city. So I went there, I knocked in the door pretty much, go to the reception downstairs, and I said, my name is so and so. I'm interested in applying for this job that it's posted on your website. And I know the name of the manager is this. Can you call her and tell her to meet me now?
Oh
And
my gosh, I love that.
I don't know that I could do it now.
No,
But
like, what that is such a, immigrant, sort of passion, right? You determined, because I have other examples of various, like, I'm like, I would never do this again, but I was like, determined. We have to go. We're going to get it done. We're going to ask for it. We're going to learn the play. I love that. That is such a beautiful passion. So what happened? Does the manager come downstairs
So
to meet you?
the manager, I think she was taken by surprise, but impressed because, Americans usually they do like initiative.
Yeah.
And then she said, look, I can't meet you now, but I can meet you tomorrow. So I had a interview with her, and then they offered me a job. And it
Oh
was
my gosh.
literally, I said 10 days after I graduated, my work permit expired. And I think I got a job offer 8 days after I graduated. It was at the corner.
So you're there for how long?
So I was there for a few years. So I worked in San Francisco in different positions in the tech world, and it was fascinating. It was amazing. I actually really loved it. And with one job, I moved to New York City, and then in New York City, I actually happened to be in New York City when September 11 happened, which was a fascinating
Yeah.
experience in itself. And I can talk about that. But then my sister lived in Canada. She had come on her own from Romania
Okay.
to Canada, and that kind of being in New York by myself in September 11 made me realize that I would like to be
Yeah.
close to family, but I didn't want to go back to Romania. So
So from there, you ended up moving to Canada permanently, just kind of once again with a job or by yourself with nothing. How did you make that transition?
I I did apply to become a permanent resident because I wanted some kind of a citizenship other than Romanian.
Mhm.
And I applied for a job as well. So it's sort of a both. But I wasn't really sure that I wanted to stay because it didn't, I'll be honest, from the States, it didn't seem like Canada was the most fascinating
Yes.
place. And I wanted to be in London. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll work for 1 or 2 years in Canada. Maybe I'll get the permanent residency or whatever, or citizenship, and then I'll go to London. And then I went there. I got in Canada. I applied for a job. I got a job in the electricity system, which was was very interesting and completely random and different than what I was doing before. But they needed marketing people because they're just privatizing. And I said, I am very excited for the job, but I need a month off to go and visit all my friends in the States. And they said yes, which is
Oh,
really, I don't know. I don't
you
know.
ask, you get it. You ask, you get it.
I know it was quite funny. So anyway, I visited my friends. I came back, and then the first day at work, I met who is my
Yeah,
husband. I met
amazing.
Alex, and he was we were young, like we were in our 20s. Everybody else was a bit older, and we were the only two young people. And I remember for the first day, the first meeting, I go into the meeting, and he was leading the meeting, and he was wearing an orange shirt, and it wasn't very, and like glasses. And I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And I said something, I don't know, because he said, and then I said something, and he said, oh, that's a very intelligent comment. We should listen to Iuliana. In that moment, I'm like, that is not an intelligent comment. I don't know anything about electricity. I know marketing, but not electricity. And I think he likes me.
Those are very nice words.
And yeah, and he became my husband after a number of years. But yeah, we started dating.
And so you continued in this sort of corporate environment for how much longer before you kind of decided, you know what, now it's time for me to transition to working for myself?
So I have been in the corporate environment, I would say, for about 20 years. So I worked at the Ontario Hydro Energy, Union Energy. I was in marketing and bringing that sort of a new um, approach, product marketing, marketing design, a variety of different functions. And then I ended up moving to Yellow Pages because they needed to reinvent their digital offering. And I worked with Yellow Pages. And then I worked with Rogers. And that kind of took me to about 2009. And I lost my job at Rogers
Mhm.
in the Great Recession. They basically downsized all the digital divisions, and they decided to just focus on traditional. And when I lost my job, I kind of took a point and I thought it was hard, of course.
Yes.
It's never easy to, even if you are laid off or whatever words you wanted to use, it's still not an easy experience to go through.
It's like a breakup, especially when you clearly not expecting it. It's coming out of nowhere. So you need some time to process, to get adjusted, to do all of that.
Exactly. And then I took what I usually do. I took 3 months off to travel. I went back to Europe to visit friends in Romania. I went to Austria. I made friends in Italy. I just reached out to whoever I knew and I kind of regrouped myself. And when I came back, I actually decided to look for a field that it was growing and it was really clean energy and clean tech. So I
Yeah.
started to read about clean tech. I became passionate and interested because I wanted to make an impact, and also was a field that I was moving from science more towards mainstream.
Yeah.
And think about that was about 2010, or like 2009. And I started to interview, but no one really wanted to give me a job because I wasn't an engineer. I wasn't an environmental scientist. And then I sort of started to talk to a lot of people. I got a consulting, actually, a job as a change management, leading as a change management consultant with Hydro One. And from there on, I realized that there's an opportunity to build my own organization in the space where I can bring my skill set, which was at this point kind of change management, communication, business development. And I created Smart Grid Canada, which was an industry association, Canadian Industry Association, to promote the development of the smart grid industry in Canada, work with utilities, work with tech companies, work with the government, and sort of do international work. And I was with them. I led it for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. I actually really loved that role of business development and promoting companies. Because
Yeah.
what happens with clean tech companies, usually if they're focused on utility or like a grid optimization, they can only sell to Canadian utilities, but they're not too many. There are only a few, like maybe under 10 in Canada, the big ones that would buy. So they have to go internationally. So I was helping them a lot to do international work, and I actually really, really loved that. And that role took me to Google.
Okay.
And it was someone said, hey, Google is looking at launching the Google Nest division here in Canada, which means they want to work with the electric utilities, with ministries of climate to bring smart thermostats in people's homes, because actually these smart thermostats lower the cost of electricity, lower natural gas consumption, so they're good. And can you help them build that business in Canada because of your work and connection? And I led that for a number of years, working with Google Nest and also working with Google X, which is sort of the moonshot factory of Google, where they come up with new ideas and new products and try to bring them to market. So as part of the leading team for it's called a Tapestry project right now, that at the time was a secret project, but now it's public. So I was part of that funding leading team.
Yeah.
Um,
And so, what I'm hearing from you as you're kind of describing all of these, beautiful and exciting stories, is not just about change, but also networking. It feels like the relationships is, what really got you from one place to the next. You're not afraid to reach out to ask whether you know someone for 5 years or a year. Do you feel like that was kind of the leading force that kind of took you through all these different experiences?
yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because you say that, I have two daughters, and one
Yeah.
of them, my youngest one, is 12 and a half, and she's trying to determine how does she connect with certain people, how she can feel comfortable and confident speaking. And when I was a child, I was a very shy child, believe it or not. But right now, I don't come across as that person. I think when I moved to the States and after I got my first job, I realized that, hey, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately, someone says no, but there's so many reasons for which people can say no.
Yeah.
It may have nothing to do with you. And
Yeah.
even if it does, doesn't really matter. You just
Yeah.
pick up yourself and go and ask the right person, because you don't connect with everyone, but you end up connecting with like-minded people, and just be patient enough. So yeah, networking and building the relationships. And
Yeah.
also, what it works for me, I realize I can network unless I really feel some meaningful connection, some genuine connection, genuine interest in what the other person is doing. And I'm looking for that open minded, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I also think that having had the pleasure of meeting your mom, she was also someone that so easily talked to people and was so courageous in her own way. I have to think that that also kind of influenced you and allowed you to become who you are today because you had that example. It was almost so natural because you saw her. I mean, I've seen her in action and she's got such a beautiful, whether she's speaking the language or not, she's
I
got a
know.
way of connecting with people, right?
I know. She wasn't even. speaking English that well. But yeah, she was. Yes, my mother definitely had a significant impact. She was sort of my role model. My Both my parents were educators. My mom was a teacher, Romanian literature, and French literature, and Italian. My dad was a physics, nuclear physics. My dad was analytical. My mom was the one who would speak and have the courage to go. So yeah, she absolutely, and she supported me. She's always supported me.
Yeah, which makes a huge difference when you have that support. Not only does someone that's role modeling for you the right behaviors, but someone that's actually supporting you along the way and giving you that encouragement that, hey, just keep going, right? You're on the right path. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I
Yep.
remember one
Yeah.
thing I would say. I remember when I was in Romania, because Romania it's actually it's a Latin-based language in Eastern Europe, and it's close to France. It's part of a francophonie, and I was learning French, and I learned French from an early age. And then I thought a number of years ago when my mom was here, because she lived with me, I thought, why didn't I go to France? I could have taken that path. And my mom said something to me, which is sort of in the wisdom of someone who's older and lived life, said, well, Iuliana, I see the way you have become in North America, and you are much more open and much more open to take a new path and less judgmental and more. While in France, whenever I would see you in that environment, you were more, it fitted what the country and the culture that I grew up in. And I'm more by the rules there. And she's like, I thought your path was to actually break away from that.
I love
Con-
that. I love that. So you end up at Google, and then what happens next? How did you fall into your current
so
state?
I ended up at Google, and then in order to continue with the Google X, I had to move to United States. And that didn't really happen for either me and my husband, Alex. And because we wanted to, we looked into it. We like looked at schools for the children. And then the pandemic came. And the pandemic actually, it was sort of a blessing in disguise, because I think it was much better that we were here at home with our friends, with our network. And that made me realize, look, I really wanted to, I've been working for 20 plus years in the startup space, but in sort of taking a product, something that is a product market fit, and taking it and scaling it and growing it. And it was an amazing experience. But I wanted to see if I can start something from scratch.
Mm,
I did have experience with the industry association with a nonprofit, but yeah, I wanted to also apply to a commercial sort of an enterprise. And then and I do run, and separate than that, I run a real estate investment and management company, sort of a development properties, and I love that. I love the creative. I love taking something that it's very non-tech and ugly and making it beautiful. I actually really like that juxtaposition to tech, but I was really interested in doing that tech venture. So I've been through different companies. It was a ghost kitchen company that I co-founded with a friend of mine who was in the States, and we worked together. But then at one point in time, we didn't really gel as partners, and that didn't work out. It wasn't easy. It's actually not easy to. You need to find the right person. So then I learned from that.
yeah.
Who's the right founder? Who's the right person? Put Do a contract, make sure that legally you have that, even if you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, and then then after that, I joined an incubator looking at, because I have so much experience in clean tech, looking at an EV fleet infrastructure venture with two other partners. But then I realized I can't actually speak. So in order to convince people, you need to be passionate, especially when you start something from zero, because
Yes.
ultimately you sell yourself, and you all the time, you sell
Yeah.
your idea and then you sell yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and I started to look into what is the next. If you look at my career, 10 years I've been in marketing, digital marketing, product management. Then another 10 years I've been sort of a business development and sales and P&L and management. And then I'm like, okay, this is my entrepreneurial path, but what could I do? What problem can I actually solve that I believe in? And regardless of how many people say no to me, I actually can go and work.
Yes. And so let me pause you for 1 second, because I'm making another observation as you're speaking, and I've heard you say this a couple of times. What I'm noticing also is that you have this beautiful ability to step back and say, what is happening in the world? Right? What is happening in the world? What's the next thing that's coming up? Which I think some people fail to do.
Yes, I thank you for saying that. I just realized by doing it, and now I'm aware of it because I've done it, but I didn't actively. I remember when I was working for Google Nest and they said, "Look, we want you to launch this business." And in Ontario, there are a few big, anyway, this is not to get, but they're a local distribution company and they're like 72 local distribution utilities. And they used to work in the States as of, oh, we go one on one and make relationship with them. And I'm like, I'm one person with another person. We're just a team of two. We can't do that. How can we bypass that?
Yeah.
What can we do? So I looked at, in Ontario, independent system operator could do that work for all the different utilities. And then I ended up going and doing that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
found that I gravitated to taking shortcuts, and that's something, I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I failed and I learned, but people can just learn and try to approach that from the beginning.
Yeah. And so you notice this opportunity and in this space around dyslexia. So how did you
I'm, but before I even get there, I do find that I identify a field that is going to grow almost maybe, let's say 7, I don't even know, 6 to 10 years beforehand,
Hmm.
but it's not an easy path. 'Cause
Yeah.
sometimes it would have been easier for me to stay in my digital media marketing. I was
Yes.
general manager at Rogers, and I see the people who were my peers then, now they're like VP and high whatever it is, higher in corporate, and I met them for Google, and I'm like, "Wow." And then they look at me, and they're like, "Oh, you're doing such interesting things. We're
Yeah.
a little bored, but we're happy with our money and everything else."
A little bit of jealousy both ways. It's like, wow, you're climbing, and they're looking at you like, wow, it looks like you're having fun. You're doing all of this creative work, right?
I know, I know. So what I wanted to say, I don't think it's easy. I just think people have their paths and they ended up, I
Yeah.
wasn't happy in that path. And also the universe just kind of kicked me out at times.
Yeah. But you are not well, but what I really appreciate about this story that you're sharing, and thank you for going through, I'm learning so many new things about you as well. Um, is that as it's coming your way, you're kind of entertaining it, you're playing with it, right? You're not afraid to play with it because some people are afraid to play with it. The universe will present things to you, but they'll be like, but this is the safe, this is the, what I've been doing, I'll just continue down this safe path, right? And you're like,
Yeah,
okay, we'll see. Let's why not?
it is true. It is very true. I think in my case, playing safe, it didn't end up being really safe. Just
Yeah.
out of my control or just whatever happened. So I decided to embrace what the world gives me. Um, so dyslexia, really, actually, I ended up getting a ad through Coursera saying, "Oh, there is an overcoming dyslexia course that is provided by Yale University through Coursera. It's online if you want to take it." And then the reason it spoke to me is because my daughter, Mara, and I named the company based on her, she actually is severely dyslexic. And really, the general population, 20% of the people and children are on the dyslexia continuum. The word that it's used is continuum, not spectrum. And it's way bigger than I thought. I actually learned it in this course.
Yeah, that is big.
And it's 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Obviously, some it's like like minor, medium, and then severe.
Wow.
They do what dyslexia is, because it's interesting. I think people know it, but they don't necessarily know what
Yes.
it is in detail. It really is a difficulty to learn how to read for someone who should have the intelligence to be a much better reader. It
Mm.
really is a reading difficulty, a language difficulty. And it's neurobiological, so you're sort of born with it. It's not linked to how intelligent you are. Actually, it's usually you're highly intelligent and you don't read according to whatever that level of intelligence is. And it comes it comes in a sea of strengths. And all of this I learned by taking this course by the Yale University. And the
Mhm.
strengths are really out of the box thinking, high order thinking, strategic thinking, creativity, reasoning, kind of resilience and entrepreneurship, like visual learning. They just don't necessarily learn to break the language and decode the language, because the part of their brain that actually manages that doesn't work the same way as someone who doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Called phonological awareness, and phonology is really the sort of a science of sounds, and you take a sound the way you hear it and you link it to how it looks, and then you pronounce it. And all these actually steps are kind of fired in the brain from like left, right to the right hemisphere. And for some people, that doesn't happen that fast.
Mm.
Even if you learn how to read, because actually dyslexic students do learn how to read, they're brilliant thinkers. There are a lot of famous people are dyslexic. Even if you learn how to read, you're always going to have it. You're never going to be as fluent and as fast as someone who doesn't have dyslexia. But that's okay, because you could still be very successful. And if
Yeah.
I to name, I don't know, famous people that, like, for instance, Steven Spielberg is dyslexic.
Mhm.
No idea.
Wow.
Um, Winston Churchill,
Wow.
Keira Knightley, Whoopi Goldberg. There are a lot of the scientists. There are actually writers who are highly dyslexic. And then it is hard, but they're doing it because they could do it, because the intelligence is there and the ability to overcome is there. But the school, the school actually fails these children.
Mm.
And I guess I can talk a bit about my daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we do that, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, so 20%, and it's sort of arranged, but how many people go through school maybe not even being diagnosed? I would have to think that there's, oh, he's just or she's just struggling to learn how to read, and eventually they do. There have to be many as well.
So in Canada, these stats don't even exist. But
Mm.
in the States and in UK, shows that schools detect between 0 to 4% at max.
Wow.
So think
Wow.
about it, like 16% gap.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And I think, yeah, wow.
And then so the scientific studies that came from cognitive psychology, from like imaging and neuroscience and pediatrics show how we learn how to read. And we need to, it's called the science of reading, basically break down the language with its rules. And after that, you could become a faster reader, you could develop comprehension. But for the longest time in North America, we use the method called the three cues reading, which you learn how to read by looking at the context and
Mm.
repetition. And most children did, but the ones with any language disabilities didn't at all. And that's
Mm.
what happened with my daughter, really. Like my daughter Mara, she was in grade 3 when she was diagnosed for severe dyslexia, and she was still reading at the level of kindergarten, despite
Wow.
the fact that we put tutors. We put her in a program that the school offered, which is called Empower Program for slow readers.
Yes.
All like it worked up to a certain point, but when all the other kids did better than her, she didn't make progress.
And just context and reminder for everybody, kids start learning how to read in grade 1, right? Is that
To
not?
be honest, you start kind of the basics of, oh, I hear the sounds k and cat, and it's ah, and then a t. Actually, in kindergarten.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All this time, she's going from kindergarten to grade 1 and 2, and you guys are providing all these, resources and support. And it's only when she gets to grade 3 is when they finally diagnose her. Oh my gosh.
I know. And I have to say, so she was a 2-year-old and she spoke later. So she had some hearing issues. Then we discovered that she had basically she had liquid in her ears. It happens when they're little children. It gets solidified and it blocks the hearing. So therefore, if you don't, she almost would hear as if her head was in the water. So she had 50% hearing loss. Is it because she had multiple ear infections? And then she would kind of walk and she would be very good, but sometimes she would be clumsy. And at
Mm.
one hand, she would be very bright, like she would play play-based from a very early age, under 2, and you'd see how she thinks. And you could see that she's bright, but she's kind of staying behind another. And I started to look at it and I'm like, interesting. So you have all these falling, clumsiness, not hearing, like hearing problems, multiple history of ear infections. And I started to research, and all these factors are actually correlated with dyslexia, but they're
Mm,
not causing dyslexia. So you
mm,
can't say, oh, she had that, then she'll have dyslexia from a medical standpoint. But I'm
yeah.
like, what if? And I kept bringing it to the my doctor. And I put her in
Think that
French.
forward. You know what? It's not that someone raised it to you, or you started kind of based on your research. You're like, is it this? Is it dyslexia? Okay.
And I
Wow.
put her in junior kindergarten. I put her in a French school, full francophone school, because I'm Romanian and Romanian is a francophone language. And she did not learn, not at all. Most kids, after a year of being immersed in a language, they do learn, they can speak. And it was
Okay.
zero, absolutely nothing. And then I'm like, okay, this is something. So she was, by that time, age 4. And even then, I still had to wait another 5 years
Wow.
until she was 9 for anyone to take any action, really, which we took it, but for anyone to allow me to take any action.
And so, what's everyone else saying? Like, what were they kind of summarizing this to be? What was their perspective?
Well, she just can't learn French. I'm
Okay.
like, okay, let's take her, put her in the English Catholic school, which was actually an amazing school because they're so warm. And so they accepted her for who she was.
Yeah.
And then then the teacher said, "Ma, I think there's something there, but I can't say anything because I'm not allowed as a teacher to say anything because I'm liable and it's not my job to actually diagnose."
Yeah.
So then, but there's a reading program, Empower. So we put her in Empower, but then even in Empower still didn't make as much success with a tutor at home and a program in school. And then by that time it was grade. And I remember I talked to the principal. I said, I would like her to receive a psychoeducational assessment, which is basically the official diagnosis, and the school should do it. And I
Hmm.
thought I put the name on the list for that in the beginning of grade 2. And I go to grade 3 to ask the principal and said, oh, well, there's no list and it's going to take another 2 years. So she was already in grade 3. And then I was desperate. So I started to talk to parents, and everybody said, you have to do it privately. You have to pay money out of your pocket to find an educational psychologist that is reputable, like has a reputation that people know it in school. And they're going to do this full assessment to determine. And with that, once you have that, then the school has to take you seriously.
Mm.
And we did that. And even that, it was actually interesting. We called the principal, we called the teacher. The teacher was also interviewed as part of the assessment. It's actually it's a comprehensive assessment. And then I said, and in the assessment basically was recommended to take a very particular program that was a reading clinic that worked with her 4-hour days every day for the next 6 months to a year, depending on how much she needs it. And we had to take her out of school. And then the school set up a big meeting in which the superintendent of the school came because they're like, why are you taking the child out of the school? It became like a big deal. And of course you have to be patient and explain. And at one point in time, I remember my husband, like having this conversation, and there's so many people involved and no one really wants to take ownership of the fact that your child struggles. And he turned to Mara's teacher, and he said to her directly, if this was your child, would you put her in this program that we want her to go to? And she said, yes, I would.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Sometimes you need to allow people to make it more personal, right?
Yes. Yes.
For them to really be able to understand your viewpoint. Because some people just, they're not able to see your viewpoint until they're like, oh, wait a minute. If this was me, that does make sense.
Yeah.
So you guys finally put her in this program, things sort of improve. Um, and so having to have to go through all these years and this constant sort of asking and looking into and exploring has sort of led you to this point of, okay, maybe this is something that I need to do and develop for others having had this experience.
Well, it was so with her, I had a 10-year journey of supporting her. Now she's in grade 10. She's doing really well in
Yeah.
school. It's still you have it for life because it is a neurological condition, but she is striving and there's support. But I realized that there's so many children that would not have had I mean, the reality is that most parents, one, they don't have the time or maybe they don't have the finances. If you look at how much money I spent 4,000 for one psychoeducational assessment, another $4,000 for the second psychoeducational assessment that I did in grade 8,
Yeah.
plus I would say 60 to $70,000 over the 10
Wow.
years for this one-on-one personalized learning for her to learn
Wow.
how to read. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And you also, were blessed with the ability to kind of see some things, and whether it was, you're perhaps more intuitive that way. But I could see some people, to your point, where parents are busy. They're in this constant routine from, drop off pickups, school, work. They're missing some of these things, and they're not connecting the dots. And this is how the kids continue to go from one grade to the next, and they're not being diagnosed properly.
Yeah, the stats show that in Canada, most children get actually a psychoeducational assessment in grade 6.
Oh my gosh.
Grade 6.
Wow.
And the other thing that actually because the biggest sort of a study in dyslexia was done by Yale. It was called the Yale Connecticut Longitudinal Study. And it started from 1980s and followed these group of children up to now, up to present. And what they saw is that if you don't identify that the child is struggling, and it could be dyslexia by grade 1, then
Mhm.
the lifelong difficulties would persist for the rest of the life.
Mm.
And we are not what the professor said that I was taking her course, and that resonated with me when I heard, and that made me take action. There's an action gap. It's not like we don't know that we need to do something, but no one does anything because you don't have to wait until grade 3 to diagnose. You could just identify. You could just say, hey, I'm screening for this. I think there's a problem. I don't know for sure, but that child needs a specific way of learning, which is the science of reading.
Yeah.
And because they have these type of flags, that child is going to receive that type of intervention. But
Yeah.
right now, we wait until grade 3. And the reason is because language disabilities are part of the DSM-5, which is the manual of mental illnesses. And you can't really get a full accurate diagnosis until the children are old enough to be able to do the whole assessment.
Yeah.
And which, I mean, that in itself, it's a whole different discussion, but I'm not looking at changing and disrupting that. But what I'm saying, anyone can actually screen with some basis of knowledge. A parent, a teacher, another, like a social pathologist or like a language pathologist. Like there are different functions that could, and actually quite a lot of tests, because that's the test that I'm developing right now with Mara Learning to identify, is my child on this dyslexia continuum? Could it have it? Can we start teaching them the way they need to as soon as possible?
So tell us a little bit more about this test that you're developing. So this is something that a parent would do themselves with their child. Would they engage a teacher? Is it school initiated? What does that look like?
So the one that I'm actually developing right now, it is for parents. So parents can do it at home or wherever they are in because it's really done over the web or iPad or the phone and it's based on their observation. It's
Yeah.
based on the observation of the child. Like how do they rhyme words? Do they pronounce in certain way? And currently, just recently, because there was a big piece of sort of a policy that happened, there was Ontario Human Rights Commission did a study that was published in 2022, but it was initially done in 2020 because so many parents of children with learning disabilities were not really being helped. And they basically, the result of that study was that Ontario is failing students with learning disabilities, and they have to introduce screening early and they have to do science of reading. Of course, when we say have to, we're talking about schools, like it's such a decentralized system. But
Mhm.
anyway, that push comes from Ontario, from the Ministry of Education. And right now in school, their literacy surveys in screening that it's done. It's not for dyslexia, it's just for overall literacy. But the
Mhm.
parents have no access to that. And
Mm.
that's kind of the problem. So the parents don't know what happened. It's the teacher. And the teacher has so many other kids and so many other kids that they
Yeah.
have to support. And I went back to school to do a master's in at Queen's University to really study this problem and do research and figure out how am I going to launch a venture that is social enterprise that helps students with dyslexia to support them throughout their K to grade 12. And I talked to a lot of teachers, and the teachers say, we want to help the children. We don't have the resources. We don't even know what dyslexia is. We don't even know what the symptoms are.
Yes, and so that was gonna be my piece. I feel like I'm hearing you say that there's also the missing piece is education and awareness for the parents and the teachers. They don't know what they don't know.
Yes, exactly.
You bring that awareness and education. Is that part of the tool that you're developing to bring more awareness to schools and parents?
Yes, that is what I'm doing with my learning. I'm spreading awareness, I'm communicating, and there are association. There's International Dyslexia Association, there's a Dyslexia Association of Canada, but there's just almost like not enough. We need more and more allies to say, hey, it's happening in 20% of the population. 80% of the language disabilities are actually are dyslexia, basically language based, which is a lot. It impacts equally boys and girls. We used to think, "Oh, it's boys," but it's not. It's boys and girls. Boys maybe sometimes act out,
Yeah.
and a lot of them may have ADHD because it's actually very common to have them. It's common to have one and the other, or like if autism and that. But if there's no behavioral component where they don't disrupt the class, these kids totally fall through the cracks because
Wow.
they don't really create any problems. And I had teachers that I talked to because I interviewed over 100 people, and they said, "Look, I mean, between a child that is on the spectrum, a child who has, let's say, a reading disability, I'm going to pay attention to the people on the spectrum. There's more awareness. They disrupt my class. I can get an assistant to help me with
Yeah.
things. I don't even know what to do. I want to help them, but I don't know what to do."
Wow. And so how do you get in front of the parents and the educators? Like is it through I guess information sessions at libraries? Like how do you get the word out there?
I'm sort of getting the word now, like looking at Facebook. I have that I published a test. I urge people to go to the website and look and take the test. And if they know someone that has any reading difficulties, kind of take the test and identify. It really is, it's not a diagnosis, it's just a screening to give you some information. Um, a lot of it is online, but also going to schools and talking. And I'm working with schools to get to test as a pilot in schools, because currently these literacy programs are actually literacy screening that it's approved by Ontario Ministry of Education, and schools can actually use it. One of them is a Canadian company, but the other two are American companies. So there's no reason for which we wouldn't, should be a um, Canadian born
Yeah.
technology solution. That's
Yeah.
actually, there's enough knowledge and willingness for us to do something like that.
Yeah. So that's what you're aiming to do in Canada. It sounds like there's something in US. What about the rest of the world? Like how are they dealing with dyslexia?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say because it is a neurobiological condition, so it does impact everyone, but certain languages are more, they're phonetic based languages such as Romanian or Italian or Spanish. Each letter has the same sound. So whenever
Mm,
you see it together, it's easy. So in these particular countries with these languages, the occurrence of dyslexia is only for the severe one. So it's about 5 to 10% at the most. You don't
yeah.
have the 20%. But in French, in English, for instance, in Japanese, it is about 20%. And it
Mm,
depends of how the English speaking languages are usually, and the countries are the one who are a bit more innovative and focused on identifying. UK and Australia are doing the best. The States is doing better, and then Canada is at the bottom. The interesting thing is kids with dyslexia can learn Mandarin because their brain is visual, and the Mandarin way of writing, like the characters are actually visual characters. So I thought
that's
that was actually a fascinating little piece of information.
love that. That is so interesting. Now, as you're doing this, what does your daughter think? What's her perspective on what you and did you feel like you had to kind of check in with her before you did this? Because it kind of I could see her, having questions and feeling vulnerable.
I'm surprised that she's actually quite happy and supportive. Um, because because she remembers when she was a little toddler, she was very spirited and like strong personality. And, kids, toddlers are toddlers, can't really express themselves. But as she started to get like even in grade like kindergarten, when she was in senior kindergarten, 5 years old age, she started to see that she's different.
Yeah.
And she started to develop a humility and a humbleness because she was different. And the kids know, deep down, they know. And it's
No.
surprising to see how many parents don't want to tell the kids. Or I had teachers in my research saying, look, I have children on an individualized education plan that the parents never told the child that he or she is an individualized education plan. So
Mm.
the kids don't know anything. And I can't tell them, hey, I'm taking you aside to do something with you because they're like, why are you doing it? And it's such a
Yeah.
strange. And I find that from an early age, I told my daughter, look, I think you have dyslexia and this is how your brain works, but there are a lot of other things that you are so amazing at. And I took away any stigma from it. And
Yeah.
now, and it really it does help. And there are points in time you're like, oh, don't tell me I have dyslexia and I have these strengths because it's still really hard. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you say is because you've introduced this to her so early, she kind of, you know, owns it, acknowledges it. This is part of her. And therefore, you sort of leveraging her name and leveraging this to sort of help others is actually positive for her, right? I'm sure she's feeling very proud because you're helping others. So they don't have to perhaps go through the struggles and how long it took you guys to, to get to the point where you were like, okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. She is happy. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't know. But she is totally supportive of me building this venture and really helping other kids not have the same. And I have to like I remember I was doing personal development workshop and I met there a young woman. She was 27 and I told her at the time, that was about 2019, I was still working for Google, and I told her what I'm about my daughter and her journey and how I helped her, and she said something to me that really resonated. She said, "Oh, I wish I had a mom like you." Not that my mom just didn't know anything about it. She loves you very much, but your daughter is so lucky to have you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, yes."
Yeah.
Because she graduated from high school, but it wasn't easy. She didn't really pursue college or university. And it's not like you need to pursue college or university. It was more that she wasn't sure what she wanted to do. She was still struggling to find that.
Yes.
And you see people who've been dyslexic and school wasn't great for them.
Yeah.
Um, and they decide, okay, I'm not going to university, but I'm really good with my hands and I can build things. And I don't know, build a like carpentry and I'm building this camera. Like there's so many ways to be successful. But I think knowing, having the tools and trying to take away the stigma and the anxiety and the sort of a self-doubting, which comes with it, if you don't identify it,
Yeah.
that's really the most important,
Yeah.
um, gift, I'd say.
Yeah. And knowing that it comes with all of these other strengths that you've mentioned, right? So now that I know what I have, let me open up sort of the space and the mind to all the strengths that I have and how I can leverage them to do whatever I decide to do.
Absolutely, 'cause, like, my daughter is extremely, and not just my daughter, a lot of the dyslexic, people are really good at, expressive language, like speaking orally, and people meet them, "Oh, like, you must be smart." But
Yeah.
I had principal telling me, "Oh, she's smart, so she probably doesn't have any language disabilities."
Mm.
And I'm like, "You're a principal. You cannot say that.
Oh, you should know better. You should know
You should
better.
know better."
So if people wanted to, I'm thinking of teachers, I'm thinking even of parents, community centers. If they wanted to bring more awareness to dyslexia, can they reach out to you to be sort of like a speaker, to do sort of an information session? Is that something that you offer?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would be more than happy to speak about my journey, to speak about what I learned, the research that I've done, the fact that I've done the masters and I'm going to publish now the research and yeah, everything that I do, because I think it's because the other thing that it's actually quite interesting for these type of people. No, before we rely on writing and reading being so important for our success, these
Yeah,
people were actually highly successful members of our community.
yeah,
My dyslexia is genetic,
yeah.
and my husband's grandfather never learned how to read.
Oh,
Never.
oh,
But
okay.
he grew up and lived in the Azores, and then he came to Canada as an older immigrant. But he was a successful farmer, a successful person. He was an integral member of the community, and no one made him feel bad. And then he
Yeah,
came and learned English actually by hearing it.
yes.
Um, and nowadays, actually, with all the technology that we have, the speech to write, that audio, you start to sort of obviously reading, it's still very important. But my daughter would always make spelling mistakes. She will never be good at spelling.
Hmm.
But her thinking is quite original, and what she's building and the work ethic she has is amazing. So then, and when you kind of start working now, you have Grammarly, you have so many tools on
Yes,
the computer that can help you. So I think we're moving past this being such a handicap. And the other thing is their way of thinking is really entrepreneurial. And now everyone has to have some entrepreneurial approach to, even if they work in a job or they start a company or they start anything or they do freelancing, because the
yeah,
9 to 5 job in the future is kind of gone. That is
yeah,
the reality.
yeah,
So we value these people. We
yeah,
value they are the workers of the future, or the sort of the thinkers of the future. So I
yeah.
think it's important to not look at it as a handicap.
And it's interesting you mentioned that it's genetic, which I didn't know. So it could skip generations?
Yes. So it can skip, in that case, it skipped 2 generations. But I do have to say one thing. I see my husband, and he's been really good at school. It's like very bright, but he's never learned foreign languages. Never. He's
Interesting.
he's so it is interesting. So he grew up in a Portuguese household.
Yeah,
His parents spoke Portuguese at home.
yeah.
Um and he doesn't speak it. He
Interesting.
doesn't speak it. Although a lot of people do speak it,
Yeah,
especially if both parents speak at home.
that's
So
so
I and
but
he
even
said,
that it's genetic, that in itself, right? As we're all kind of, always thinking about, our health, our, ancestors, our background, that's such a important thing to know.
yeah. And the other thing I wanted to do with Mara Learning, which we're building now in the platform, but um, and it's not ready now, will be a little later, is people, once you do a psychoeducational assessment, people, you can get a profile of what type of learner you are. Like I see my husband and I see my daughter, they're visual learners. They have to see,
Oh,
like she tells.
for anyone to know what type of learner you are.
Exactly. You could be visual. Other people are really good at hearing. Other
Yes.
people are very good at by doing. They're kinesthetic learners. They have to do things in order to absorb that information. I think that type of knowledge currently is done if you do the psychoeducational assessment. But I want to make that accessible and easier. We have the tools through technology to
Yeah.
learn about yourself
Yeah.
before even needing a diagnosis. Everyone can learn what type of learners they are.
Yeah, I love that. So what's available on the Mara Learning website right now that people can leverage today? And I guess what's coming in the future? What are you working on?
So today I'm working on a screening to identify signs of dyslexia for kindergarten to grade 3, because that is the one that would really impact the most students if we can address that and learning outcomes. And then I'm launching that one for later all the way up to grade 12.
Yeah.
And then next stage would be to develop virtual diagnosis working with therapists, certified therapists. It's all evidence based,
Hmm.
but being able to leverage some of the technology, because right now, if you need to have a diagnosis and you put your name down to get one from a psychologist, educational psychologist, a doctor cannot give that. So it's actually educational psychologist. Um, the wait period could be 6 months to 8 months, which is really long. I'm talking privately, even just privately. For
Yeah.
the schools, could be 2 to 3 years because there's just not enough.
Wow.
So I want to find a way to make that more accessible, but also be evidence based and very rigorous. And,
Yeah.
and and there are companies to provide that type of service in United States,
Yeah.
and I'm building that in Canada as well. And then that's the second stage of the platform. And the third stage would really be the remediation, the teaching. Like everyone can have a kind of personalized tutor. That because it's actually allowed and it's possible because of AI and because of technology. But that requires more investment.
And so if there are parents out there that are kind of thinking something is off, maybe it is dyslexia, what would you recommend would be their first step? Like, what is it the first thing that they should be doing?
I think the first thing is they should be doing it, they should do a screening for
Okay.
dyslexia.
Yeah.
And if and that kind of gives you it's low versus pay attention versus it's high. And once you have that, there would be identify what type of learner your child is
Yeah.
and talk to the teacher. I'm putting a lot of resources. I don't have them up yet, but I'm putting resources of what's the path of action.
Yeah.
You can't really move and diagnose your child until grade 3, which is okay.
Yeah.
But you could advocate to have support
Hmm.
and teach them in the beginning with more one-on-one attention.
Yeah. And if you had any sort of one piece of advice for those parents, what would that be?
Hmm. I think the one piece of advice is initially emotionally,
Yes, I
not
couldn't agree more.
despair.
Yeah, that could be very hard. It's like, why my child? What did I do? Well, how do I get through this? Oh my gosh. Are there support groups for parents that kind of go? There must be support groups.
There are actually on Facebook and do not despair.
Yeah.
Absolutely, um, it's common for fathers initially to take it
Or
the hard way.
yeah.
My husband, which I consider very open-minded and enlightened, "Oh, I'm a bad parent. Oh, she's a bad child."
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
talked to a lot of people who've been through that, and they said, "Yes, my mother was the one who was my advocate. My father was initially, 'What do I do wrong? What is he doing wrong?'" Be patient and move through that, and then observe your child and be your child advocate and look for signs of reading courses and materials to teach your child and
Yeah.
talk about it. I'd say don't consider it a taboo because it actually really doesn't help the child.
Yeah. And what advice do you think Mara would have for kids that are in her shoes? What do you think she would say?
Mm, that's a very good question. I don't even know what you say. I need to ask her next time. I think she'd say one of the things that everybody told me about her, she said how hard she works even if she doesn't get it. You see, she really tries to understand a word or a sentence and she tries hard, but something doesn't click, but she never blames herself.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one.
It I don't know how you do it's hard to do that as a parent, and some kids do it more than others.
Yeah.
Um, the other, I think, advice, it didn't really work for her, but the other, because she really loves studying. Now, academic and success and learning is she loves it. She really strives in it. But find other things that you are good at, that you feel good, because it's important. And it could be sports, could be art, could be music, could be anything.
Yeah.
Because confidence is very important.
So important. Very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were to reflect back on your life, you've had such a beautiful, creative, and exciting life. What is that one thing you're most proud of?
Mhm. I think I'm most proud of that I never accepted the status quo.
Mhm.
I've always kind of moved to the next thing, and then I I always found something else more interesting that I can kind of build.
Yeah.
And I remember I said that in an interview, and I didn't get the job. And it was actually funny because they're like, "Oh, we don't want that in our country." But that's fine.
Any regrets?
Mm. Any regrets? Not really, but I do find it could have been an easier path if I accepted it. Um, so just making peace with that. I'm still making peace with that. Yeah.
What advice would you have for your younger self?
Take everything you comes your way, make the best of it, but without too much worry. But because it ends up, if you're curious, if you work hard and you connect with people, it ends up being wow. When you're young, it's hard to see. You think every situation could be, oh, this is the end of the world, but it is not, not at all.